Shelley, 15 years older than Addie, had 3 kids to worry about, 2 of them teenagers, and didn't need the added burden of Addie's problems. Besides, suppressing her feelings was a coping mechanism Addie had learned to use right after her mother died. Instead of facing the hurt, anger, and fear, she'd efficiently stuffed her feelings in hidden places. It was like a child who cleaned her room by hiding and stuffing things in closets, under beds, and in drawers, so on the outside it all looked neat and tidy. "I'm fine, Shelley." Addie was already finding places to tuck away the negative emotions Brandon's wedding announcement brought to the surface. She took a bite of the cake and closed her eyes to savor the moment. At the same time, she did her best to ignore the fact that since the breakup, her jeans were starting to feel a little tight. I know how I feel about this chocolate cake." When she opened her eyes again, her sister had that look on her face, the one that said she wasn't going to let it go. "Dad's worried about you, too." Addie swallowed the lump in her throat, along with the cake. She had tried so hard to hide her feelings from him and thought she was doing a great job. "What am I doing that's so worrisome?" "He said you don't go out anymore and refuse to attend any church single activities." "Hello. You would have stopped going too if you were me. Need I remind you about the singles retreat I totally ruined for the new youth pastor? Once I spoke up, all spiritual thoughts were gone, and the poor guy spent the rest of the time trying to get things back on track." The corner of her sister's mouth twitched. "I'm sure anyone could have made the same mistake." I don't think so." Addie felt a hot flush sear her cheeks when she thought about her blunder. While everyone sat around the lodge's cozy fireplace listening to the message, she'd been daydreaming about the new youth pastor who was both single and cute. When he'd suddenly turned to her and asked her to share her thoughts on what he'd been talking about, Addie hadn't had a clue what he'd even said. Desperate, she thought about Sunday's sermon and blurted out her desire to follow God's plan so she could gain immortality. Only it had come out wrong, and Addie had witnessed to the large gathering of young single adults her desire to gain immorality. Letting out a deep breath, Addie glanced up at her sister. "I quit attending the activities because I couldn't take one more guy asking me how my quest for immorality was going." Shelley snorted a laugh before covering her mouth with her hand. When she'd composed herself again, she said, "Okay, I can understand that. But why have you stopped going out?" I think I just explained that." She cut into her cake and lifted it up toward her mouth. "Besides, instead of giving up refined sugar, I've decided to give up men." While Addie enjoyed the chocolate confection melting on her tongue, her 2 nephews came into the kitchen with about a half a dozen boys ranging in age from 14 to 16. It was the perfect time to escape her sister's pending lecture about her decision to stop dating. "Hi, Aunt Addie," her nephew said before diving into the chocolate cake. "Hey, guys." Addie scooted away from the table to make a quick departure. Bryce, one of her nephew's best friends, moved in front of her and blocked her exit.
"Hey, I need to ask you a question."
Addie eyed him warily. Bryce was a tad on the arrogant side, especially since he was bigger than most college guys, a comparison Addie regretted making a few months ago, since now the kid thought she would go out with him. "Sure, what's up?" A confident grin stole over his face as he leaned in close.
"I was just wondering how the quest for immorality was going."
"Ha ha. Very funny." Of course, all the boys thought it was hilarious, including her nephews. "You're way too young for an answer, Bryce." Addie sidestepped the little twerp and waved to her sister. "I'll see you later." Shelley was too busy reprimanding the boys raiding her kitchen to try to stop her. Feeling somewhat deflated, Addie drove away from her sister's house and tried thinking happy thoughts. If she couldn't pull off happy-go-lucky girl for her father, it might lead into another Addie is depressed conversation. She wasn't depressed, just a little under-enthused.